Hi, welcome to the Global Town Hall of December 2021. On the last Sunday of every month, Project Save the World holds the Global Town Hall for people anywhere in the world who want to talk about their issues as activists. And here we have about 20 people who've gathered to chat about things that are going on in their lives. It's the day after Christmas, and we're all ready to have a conversation. Mostly, I think, tonight it's about nuclear war. So blessings, and here we are, already started. So why don't you do whatever it is you want to talk about first, David?
Okay, I'll be really short. I have, with some help from friends, put together a plea to peace groups and people of goodwill all over Canada to do something about the current Quebec bashing. And it's not just Quebec, it's happening to a lot of different groups for a lot of different reasons. So it's really a plea for some peace work that we can do in our own society. And for the last 3 days or so, I have been working day and night writing this very short, it's only about 4 pages long, plea, which is partly based on the experience of Quebecers, but partly based on my own travels around the country. And I've been told by friends who've read it that it's very heavy on the historical stuff and not an easy read, but on the other hand, it's very short. So I would love to have comments, suggestions, reactions, revisions from anybody in this group, because I think it's going to need more revisions and it might eventually get published, possibly in Peace Magazine, but we'll see. And it might even get translated. We'll see about that too. So I'm going to put the brief description and the link in the chat.
Is it currently English or French language?
It's written in English.
Okay, is there room to put the whole thing in? Or how can they get it? If you have a link, maybe they could go get it if you just put the link in there.
Just a sec, I'm fighting the Zoom here. The whole thing is a Google Doc. So once I put the link in chat, anybody can just go and read it. That's simpler than trying to post the whole document.
Okay. What do you want else to say about it? Do you want to tell people why they should read it? I'll give you some more time if you need it.
Well, I'll try to be really brief, and then I can maybe field some questions. But I'm sure that everybody on this call is aware that there has been a tremendous hullabaloo about Bill 21 in Quebec, and that some people think it's the worst thing that's ever happened, that it's anti-ethnic, anti-foreign, nativist, wrong-minded. There are other people, including people in Quebec, including a number of Muslim women, who say that it's badly needed. So Quebec society has been polarized by this debate, but the thing I've written is an attempt to explain where the debate comes from in Quebec, and also to draw some parallels with things that have gone on in the rest of Canada, so that we're looking at the lived experience, not just of Quebecers, but to some extent of minorities elsewhere in Canada, and drawing a few parallels and making a few distinctions. It's that thing, it's that appeal to everybody to engage in, how can I put it, in respectful listening to each other. That's the real heart of what I'm trying to do here. But that's why I need everybody's reaction to this initial draft. It can certainly use improvement. And the second possibility which emerges from it, it's already come out in discussions with a couple of friends, is that some people feel it'd be extremely helpful to hear first-person statements by ordinary people, whether they're Quebecers or not, saying this is the kind of world we would like to see for our children. This is the world we want to live in. funnily enough, there's a woman in Toronto named Meta Spencer who built a whole website around this. So the possibility is that by putting together such a compilation of personal statements, we might actually be feeding the To Save a World website with more material. So there's the challenge.
Thank you, David. Okay, well, if anybody wants to question him or reply or something, this is the time to do it. And then I'll open the floor for other, whatever else is on your mind. Any comments on what David has proposed?
David, could you maybe give us an overview, a brief summary of what Bill 21 is? Because we do have some people on the call that aren't in Canada and may not be familiar with that current legislation.
Okay, boy, a brief summary is difficult, but I'll make three main points. First of all, there's been a huge debate in Quebec society that goes back more than 70 years on getting out from under the thumb of the church and the black years when a pro-fascist Catholic church was closely allied with an extremely right-wing Duplessis government. Everything that's happened in Quebec since 1935 stems from that. Bill 21 is merely one step on a very, very long journey of Quebec society out from under the domination of a very hard right with church backing to an open society. The controversy, of course, is that the latest version, the law that was passed in 2019, supposedly to guarantee the rights of secular society in Quebec. This law requires people not to wear religious symbols. And one clause in that law bans the wearing of religious symbols in schools. I don't think anybody would quarrel with wearing of religious symbols by judges, policemen, prison guards, and whatnot. But the school thing has become a controversy because a number of very intelligent, caring, and convinced young Muslim women feel they've been personally targeted. That because they wear a hijab, even though it's not in any way an advertisement of extremist Islam, it's just an expression like somebody wearing a crucifix around their neck. It's just an expression of their personal faith. But that's where the controversy lies. And there are people who feel that to ban such wearing of personal symbols is an interference with freedom of religion, unconstitutional, a violation of the Canadian Charter. There are other people who feel equally strongly because some of them come from countries where to do otherwise would actually to put your life in danger. They feel that the wearing of such symbols is an attack on their personal freedom, and so on. It's an extraordinarily complex issue. And almost everybody involved in this debate has now changed their mind at least once. One of the advocates of the original doctrine of so-called reasonable accommodation of religious minorities actually said that he had been betrayed by what's happened. Another member of that same commission, another religious sociologist and philosopher, has said that, quote, now that everybody is bashing Quebec, he has to say that he is proud to be a Quebecer and he totally supports what's being done. So this in the internal dynamics of Quebec is probably as big and as passionately felt an issue as any of the debates of the last 40 or 50 years, because people feel that the meaning of their lives is at stake. And now the rest of Canada is getting into it. Now the rest of the world is getting into it. And as we know from looking south of the border, people who feel passionately about religion one way or the other, either that it should or should not be part of public life, can go to some pretty distant extremes. Thank God that hasn't happened here. And what I'm hoping with this invitation to discussion is that we can avoid it happening by understanding each other better.
What I liked about the article by David Miller is that he joined also the fact that we had these Indian First Nations people buried around Catholic schools in British Columbia, in Saskatchewan and Alberta, but also here in Quebec, where we had our leader, Les Orphelins de Duplessis, Bruno Roy, the writer who wrote many, many books about his experience as an orphan who was deemed to be an ignorant and to be only an orphan that should be taken care by the Catholic Church and not educated, just to be in an orphan where he would be subjected to the obligation of cleaning the dishes and things like that. And he became a writer of 16 books, and also he founded the Maison des Écrivains du Québec. So he became very, very much respected.
Say his name again. I don't know who you're talking about.
Bruno Roy. And he founded the Maison des Écrivains, the writer's house in Quebec.
Spell it. I'm not even able to visualize what you're saying.
Roy, R-O-Y.
Pronounce Roy in English.
Yeah.
R-O-Y.
Correct.
Okay. And the first name again?
Bruno.
Bruno Roy.
Like Brown.
Okay, thank you.
So Bruno was the Secretary of Artists for Peace when he died in 2010. And he was very in the middle, in the sense that he thought that for the good of the orphans, he should address the government of Quebec without being too rude. But in the same time, he wasn't listened by the archbishops. He was sort of discredited, and he was really his books were also transferred on television by programs which sort of educated Quebecers about this terrible fate that Quebecers suffered. But then we know in the last 2 years now that not only the Quebecers suffered this fate, but the the First Nations people in British Columbia and everything. And I appreciate David Miller's plea because he sort of links all this together as a sort of a fight for freedom by people who want the liberal government to sort of change this. And what's extraordinary is the liberal government now has voted to devote $40 billion for the First Nations in order to try to heal this systematic racism, which was not only
about the federal government now.
The federal
not
government.
Quebec.
Yeah. No, Quebec, there's no liberal government there now, and there won't be for soon, I think. So they're doing their fair share, and that's why I sent you this document, our voice for 2022, where we are hard at liberals, but not on this point, to make sure that the First Nations will get a fair share of justice after 300 years of unjust treatment. So David brings this all together, saying that, hey, we should be careful, not in order to change this horrible colonial attitude of the speak white attitude of English Canada against all the minorities. And this is, and I think we are coming at age now of doing this precisely. And bravo to the government for this.
Okay, thank you. Now, I have a suggestion, and then I'm going to call on Ronnie because you put your hand up a little while ago. I want to propose that David post this thing on the website, because the January issue just came out of Peace Magazine. It's going to be months now before we'll have the April issue. So there's no point in waiting, and you'll actually have more opportunity to create a dialogue if you publish it on the website than in the magazine, because right here and now I'm going to ask people to go there and they can comment on it. So where you want to post it, David, is in the section, in the comments column section of the policy sector on governance. Now, that's one of the things that we don't cover with the 6 global threats is ethnic cleavage or human rights things. That they're not under a special threat, but they come under the heading of governance, because it's the responsibility of government to protect people and their human rights and so on. So please, debates about the such things as ethnic conflicts or human rights violations should be placed under the heading of governance. So if you'll post it there, then I'll ask those of you who want to read it and comment on it, please read it, and then you can post a reply, and then you can reply to other people's replies, and we can have a real debate on that website. Okay, I'm glad they're doing it. Thank you, Pierre. Thank you.
And I say one more thing, which is that I tried to bring in some aspects of injustices that happen to almost any ethnic minority in Canada.
I wanted some kind of an indication whether you have a position, David, on this.
I tried to figure it out too, and I couldn't.
Yeah,
But on the fly, I mean.
Yeah. It's certainly not an argument purely in favor of Bill 21. It's an attempt to explain why Bill 21 was put into law, but it's quite critical, actually, of the bill. I myself am not taking a position on behalf of any group. This is purely a personal appeal. And what I'm hoping is that people in the peace movement will realize that we can do some peacemaking right here in our own country.
Can I just say that I have a very good friend who's a humanist, and he totally opposes any religious, ritual or symbols, or so he's fully in agreement with this bill. And to my mind, he's racist, because he thinks that people who wear hijabs or anything like any kind of he just thinks it's all very oppressive, and it's not about freedom. It's about oppression, and religion is an oppressive force, and we should get rid of it, get rid of all religion. To my mind, that's like, it's racist in a way, according to what I understand what racism is. So
at one point, I remember calling someone like that, well, he was a relative, a religious atheist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he's so fervent that it's just as much of a religion, right?
Yeah.
Atheist.
Exactly.
I'm not Canadian. I live in the northwestern part of the United States, about 60 miles south of Seattle. But I appreciate the title of what David has written, an appeal for generosity. I like putting forth a positive value and saying, let's build upon a positive value that we had. And I know this has been a controversy in France for a number of years. I did not know that this was happening in Quebec also. But when I look at an issue that's controversial, I find it helpful to help people figure out what are your core values that we can build upon. Because very often, if we get out of the details of a particular public policy dispute and get down into core values, like how do you respect human rights? Okay, let's talk about how to respect human rights. And this appeal for generosity that's putting a positive approach to it. And so I very much appreciate that sense. And as Canadians, whether in Quebec or elsewhere in Canada, talk this through, I just appeal to people to draw upon your best values, help other people discover what their core best values are, and build from that, and see, maybe you can find some things that you have in common, but if not, at least you'll understand you're doing this from the best values and not try to impute bad motivation on other people. So that's my pitch. Thanks.
Thank you, Glenn. Where are you, Bodan?
I'm from Poland, yes.
Are you in Poland or
I am in Poland. I am in
Okay.
Poland, in Warsaw, and I'm interested in the topic because Poland is a very Catholic, by Catholics dominated country, and also the country ruling, it's very connected with the church. So the events in Canada, which involve with the Catholic Church, has a strong response in Poland.
okay?
And-
Now that just shows how I'm off base. You see, I was guessing that you were going to be wanting to talk about what's going on the border between Poland, or has been going on the border between Poland and Belarus. And that you were interested in the questions that threaten us all now, or worry us all, about the relationship between Russia and Ukraine, because your name is spelled with an H instead of a G. You see, all of that is elaborated just at one little spelling difference, and that's why I jumped to all these conclusions. So welcome to you from Warsaw. Do you have a comment? You seem to be actually engaging with the question of the relationship between the Catholic Church and the rest of Quebec society. Is that the issue that interests you here?
No, yes, it is of my interest, but I see that you have the interest of the situation on the Polish-Belarus border and what is happening now. It seems that it's the part of the global situation, because this border is in reality the border between Western NATO pact and Russian Chinese pact, because the Russian and Chinese, they are connected with the military pact together, and they have the military exercises on the Polish border together, the Chinese and Russians. So it's the great play, which is, I will say, Pacific is more important as Europe. So it's the big question how far it will be solved, the problem between the Russians and United States with a peaceful way, or how far we will come to the new confrontation period. So Poland itself and the Belarus, they are the minor players in this big play, because the big play is between the big superpowers, and the main the human humanity and the human attitude and the human rights, they are in the shadows of the chips and conductors and the supply with the chips and the big politics. So I could comment this way, that the conflict by themselves is decreasing because of cold winter. So it's the number of the migrants, they are decreasing. But the big wall, which is dividing east and west, is in construction, like between the Mexico and United States, which will have.
I'm sorry, I wasn't aware of that. Who's building a wall where?
The wall is built by Poland. The wall which should divide Poland from Ukraine,
Yeah.
which is few hundred kilometers long and which is in construction.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it will be stable border, and it will cancel the politics of getting Europe together.
Okay. Andrei Kamenchikov, you're living in that general zone? I think you're in Kiev, aren't you? But would you comment on what we've been hearing about this? And I don't think there's been much news in the last few days about the border issue, but I think there's a lot more concern about the massing of Russian troops on the border of Ukraine. And I don't know how much these two confrontations are connected. Probably not in any formal sense. But Andrei, do you want to have something to say to Botan?
Yeah, it's true. I am in Kiev right now, and it's as for the crisis along the Polish border. These things are somewhat interconnected, but probably not that directly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much that crisis, how deep Russia was involved in that crisis. It probably was somewhat involved. I think that the main player there was the Belarus dictator, of course, because and of course the crisis along the the massing of troops along Ukrainian border is what really raise raise concerns right now, because this is it's almost certainly it's more blackmail than attempt to really actually invade. But nonetheless, there's always this risk, and there's always a chance that there might not be, let's say, a major invasion, but there might be a escalation of hostilities in the areas where the war is already going on in eastern Ukraine. So that certainly is a very major concern, because if God forbid something really starts taking place, some military confrontation really starts taking place, we're basically in a whole new geopolitical setup, and we don't know, how what it's gonna lead to.
Something has been said about France. The secular fight began more than 100 years ago, when Émile Zola, the writer, wrote J'accuse in defending a Jewish officer from attacks by the Catholic Church and by the army, French conservative army, who accused this poor officer of and sent him to jail. And this was the beginning of the great fight by France to make schools separate from religious beliefs, and to protect the integrity of school, which is science, to separate it from religions, which are, of course, tales or whatever you can find. So this is where we are in Quebec, very much opposed to Trudeau and to others who fight against Law 21 on saying that we must respect religious beliefs. And we are more Republican in Quebec, and we think that we want to get rid of the Queen and all these unnecessary things. And we believe that our schools should be taught by people who are not imposing on the children any of the religious tales, that they should just teach what science is about or what humanism is about. And that's, I think, where the fight is starting, in a sort of a terrible way, because the problem also is that the English newspapers don't publish what we think about this. And this is it's such an unfair discussion when we are censored from expressing what we want to say.
Well, I can assure you that I will not censor anybody as long as you're decent.
Thank you.
If you say rude things, we might, but you have to be very rude because I'm pretty open-minded. All right, who else has a thought that you want to share? Please if you want to answer anybody later, you can always go to the website and comment there. Please do. And of course, this video will be available later in the week after I've edited it a bit and shortened it as much as I can reasonably. Anybody from far away? All right, well, then we'll listen to some Canadians.
Excuse me, is San Francisco far away?
Oh, it's just wonderful. I'm from Berkeley, so I definitely will give you the floor, Roger. Welcome.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I just tuned in. I'm a little late, and I have to go in and out because I have a paralyzed stepdaughter I have to take care of. But I'll just throw this out and forgive me for missing the first part of this. I'm the president of Democratic World Federalists in San Francisco. And we're arguing that for world peace, we need a new UN charter, that the charter is wrong. And it's really wrong. Mm-hmm. It's so bad that the UN Security Council is basically almost a criminal cabal. They're the leading weapons dealers in the world. So to make a long story short, we're on the mission to see if we can get the UN General Assembly to launch a charter review and compare it to the Constitution for the Federation of Earth, which is really starting to catch on. So that's my 2 bits worth in terms of getting world peace. We don't think we can actually end these wars. You know, we're close to war in Ukraine, close to war in China, all this stuff. The US wants to conquer the world. We all know this. And only world government's going to stop it. So that's our pitch.
All right. You know, last week I did a talk show on that very subject with a Canadian woman. If you go to the website to savetheworld.ca and look for videos, it's about a week ago. I can't remember the number. Actually, Adam,
I'll put it in the chat, Meta.
All right, except chats don't work on these talk shows. You have to actually say them so that I can make them audible. People watching the talk, the video will not be seeing the chat. So when you find it, Adam, let him know to go look. Because
yes, I have it here. Episode 386, Imagining World Governance with Drea Klein-Bergman.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Roger. And I'm glad to meet some more World Federalists. Because you guys are doing important things. Do you want to say a little bit more about how about your notion of a new charter for the UN, what it should look like? What kinds of reforms would you like to, would you personally or your organization favor?
Well, I ratified what's called the Earth Constitution, which was drafted over 30 years by some visionaries, all world federalist world citizens. We want a democratic world parliament. We want enforceable world law because right now the superpowers are above the law. And that's partly why we can't stop any of this stuff, because they do anything they want and they never go to jail for it. We're setting up 1,000 world electoral districts to represent 7.6 billion people on the planet. From our point of view, we're hoping we can merge with the UN General Assembly and make the UN Security Council. It's really not a legitimate body anyway, but make it consultative or something along those lines. The idea of sovereignty is a myth. The Latin American countries always beg for sovereignty, but what they're really saying is they want the CIA off their back. But the notion of sovereignty has to be rethought by the activists, because it's actually fitting right into the hands of the multinational corporations, international banking. They love it when we have all these separate countries that they can divide and conquer, which is what happens all the time, not to mention escaping taxes. So under the Earth Constitution, the World Parliament has control of international banking, the multinational corporations. It's a non-military government. There's no world dictator. The design is different. It calls for a three-house world parliament: House of Nations, House of Peoples, and a House of Councilors. That might be too large, and that might end up smaller in terms of an effective world parliament.
Just a sec, I want to, this term, the House of Councilors, that's a new one for me. What would that be? Is that like the Security Council?
No, it's the concept is kind of like a house of wise ones. People from around the world that have wisdom, and incorporating them in the world parliament. So that's the idea of the House of Councilors.
What would you do with the Security Council? Abolish it?
Well, yes.
Okay.
If I get my way. I mean, the Security Council has been a joke practically from the beginning, but it's there, and the Russians and the Chinese want to keep it there, as does the United States, but they're not thinking about it correctly.
All right. Anybody want to join and comment on his bold proposals? I've got a bunch of my own, but they don't fit yours. And I'm not going to expose my weirdness at the moment. Who has
wants to speak? Glenn.
Glenn had his hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Glenn. I can't see your
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I like that fresh thinking that Roger's proposing for a number of reasons. One is that the United States, as he says, really is trying to conquer the world. And the United Nations Security Council was created, as was the whole UN, after World War II, and is dominated by the big nations that won World War II. And a number of those have nuclear weapons, including the United States, Britain, France, Russia, and now China. It's a bullying of the rest of the world. And we can see how it is contrary to the world opinion, because the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons that passed overwhelmingly through the General Assembly in July 2017, with 122 votes out of 193 nations, and then went out for ratification. Now 59 nations have ratified the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, but all the 9 nations that have nuclear weapons themselves oppose this, and Trump even tried to bully some of the nations that have ratified it into unratifying it. But we will not be able to get rid of nuclear weapons as long as these bully nations on the Security Council can do that.
Alexei, how are things in Moscow? What are you up to these days? And what do you think is going to happen about this conflict with Ukraine?
Well, as for the conflict in Ukraine, nothing is clear so far, apart from some very bullish statements from the Kremlin government, really disrespecting nations that are not endowed with, if we may say so, endowed with nuclear weapons. So the most recent of them, I heard earlier today. The press secretary of Putin said that the red lines, the proposed treaty, which is a bit nonsensical, is a matter of life and death for Russia, which of course it is not, because all the discourse around Ukraine is intrinsically bad, because it does not have Ukraine in the equation, and the will of the Ukrainians, the will of Belarusians, the will of free nations. So it's like a 19th century style, like concert of great powers. So great powers sit together, like in the Vienna Congress, and they decide how they divide the cake between themselves. And that's something that I think does not really have to have place in our 21st century. But the reality is really harsh, and we only hope that some practical considerations will keep even the most ruthless dictators from having their will done.
Hello.
Hello. Oh, is it Odile? Hello. Hello.
We are from Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say that there was a resolution at the General Assembly for a weapon of mass destruction free zone. And in November and December, in the General Assembly, there was a discussion on the weapon of destruction free zone in the Middle East. And it would be a good thing to advance this issue as a free zone, free nuclear weapon zone, have advanced in the world. They are like 64% of the land now. And we need to have, it's regarding the weapons that are chemical, biological, and nuclear. So I am going to try to write a grant for to do more grassroots on this issue in Israel, because Israel is the only country so far in the Middle East that has not joined the NPT and has nuclear weapon. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say to you.
Thank
I
you.
don't know something else that you would like to say.
Okay, Alan. Hi.
Hi, so Odile and I work together. Odile is part of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. And in some way, the role of Israel as the nuclear power and has so much influence in every congressional district in the United States that American policy is so beholden to what the Israeli government wants to do that it's very hard to get any motion on any question trying to break the U.S. intent to full spectrum dominance, as the Pentagon says. So the weapons of mass destruction free zone is a kind of leverage point into a way of how to get all the powers in the Middle East somehow to the peace table to see, well, what is a basis for some kind of regional security that can perhaps break that logjam. And
It's a great idea. It's just I don't know what you're going to do to get the Israelis to show up.
Well, you need to do event, collect email, organize them one by one, as we have always done on any issue. You have to get petition. That's what we do. That's how we got the weapon prohibition of nuclear weapon recently, a couple years ago.
Right. Sounds good. I'm all for you. Okay, Andrei Kamenshikov, and then I'll call and vote on it again.
Yeah, I just would like to say that, certainly the U.S. policies can be criticized for many things, but I don't like, it's not a black and white picture, and we shouldn't portray the United States as trying to dominate the entire world and things like that, because it's simply not true. And if we want to move forward in rather than just speaking to ourselves and making ourselves look feel nice, if we want to actually forward any agenda, we have to be realistic. And we have to, when we're speaking about the issue of nuclear weapons, for example, we need to realize that if for many countries that possess nuclear weapons today, they see it, rightly or wrongly, but they see it as a guarantee of their safety in a sense, in some basic sense. Probably not the United States. I mean, I think that the United States should be the most interested in abolishing nuclear weapons, simply because it already has a great advantages in any other kind of weapons, or just about any other kind of weapons you can think of. So in a sense, it's not in the interest of the United States, even from a simply military point of view, to hold on to nuclear weapons. But for other countries, that's the reality. And if we want to achieve real progress in denuclearizing the world, then we need to think about some kind of comprehensive security arrangements that would address the concerns that nations have, including nuclear nations that hold on to their nuclear weapons because they believe that this is some sort of a guarantee of some level of territorial integrity, safety, or whatever.
Thank you. Okay, Bodan, your turn, and then back to Pierre, and then Glenn.
I want to attach to mention by Andre that this armament, we want to give opportunities for the certain nation to resign from the atomic weapons, and we shouldn't forget the example of Ukraine, which freely decided to abolish atomic weapons and transcontinental rockets, and having the guarantee in Budapest from United States, Russia, and Great Britain on the guarantee of the integrity and the borders. And then the borders have been changed by force and nothing happens. So it is the example for those which want to resign, like Israel, that the international guarantees, they are very questionable. So we should follow the example of Ukraine, that the international pressure has some power, has some guarantee, before we will go to the other countries to convince them to give up the deadly weapons. And I think it's also the time when we have conflict time in the Europe to come back to the demilitarization zones, to get out of atomic weapons from the Central Europe, to decrease the political tension, because the risk of the war is now very high because of political reasons. We are in the crisis. The best way to get the people on control is to get them to the army. So there is the time for the social pressure, political pressure, to get the negotiation by peaceful way.
Thank you. Okay, Pierre.
One of the first things that we say, there are two very big differences between what are traditional armaments and nuclear armaments. For traditional armaments, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute calculated that in the last 4 years, NATO or countries belonging to NATO spent between 16 to 18 more money into military expenses than Russia. So this balance is very worrying because, of course, in the realm of nuclear weapons, Russia still has 6,000 weapons. And the fact is that NATO and Canada and United States don't want to sign the ban treaty, which would be a step forward. And also the frontier, the supposed wall that Poland wants to build is between Belarus and Poland, not between Ukraine and Poland.
The United States is still at war in Korea. The United States has been threatening North Korea consistently since the early 1950s, and very often we've threatened them with nuclear weapons. North Korea feels from their own national security standpoint, they need to have nuclear weapons to be a deterrent against attack. The United States has overthrown many, many nations, but the United States has not overthrown any nations that have nuclear weapons. So it's reasonable for other nations to assume that for their own national security, they need a deterrent. And it's not only that mindset, but also our government is so corrupt that our foreign policy, including our decades-long wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, which are still not done. We still have troops there. They just define their role differently. All that stuff is driven by the giant corporations that make military weapons, and they fund the election campaigns of Congress and presidents, along with other big corporations. And just recently, Congress added $25 billion more onto the already huge budget that Biden had proposed, which was even bigger than Trump's budget. And the Congress funded more weapon systems that the Pentagon did not even want. The Pentagon did not want certain weapon systems, and Congress says, no, we're going to give money for that anyway, because Congress is funded by the weapons manufacturers. We have in this country, the U.S., there's this culture of U.S. exceptionalism. The United States does not need to pay attention to international law because we're better than everybody else. We need to have an internationalist perspective, and I appreciate what Maida's doing here with people from lots of countries, sharing insights from that. We need that kind of thing in the United States.
When Glenn mentions exceptionalism, I'm a psychologist. What I call that is delusions of grandeur. It's very dangerous. It's deeply embedded in some of our leaders. The solution to all of this and to the problem of nuclear weapons is just what Einstein said, who was a world federalist, which is we need world government. And that's where the Earth Constitution comes in. That's why I hope all of you, I'm going to give you my personal website. You can look into this stuff. Personal website's earthfederation.info, INFO. It's very hard psychologically for us Americans to criticize our own governments. It's like discovering that your father is a bad guy. It's emotionally a shock. And many people just can't. I have relatives that when I tell them the truth about what the U.S. is up to, they can't handle it. They put their head in the sand despite all of the facts over history. Oop, lost something there. So what I'm saying to you is to get rid of these nuclear weapons, we're going to need a world federal government. And part of the reason for that is we're going to have open inspections everywhere. And any of you that think we can get by with sovereign nations, where a nation can say, you can't come here and look, we'll never get rid of nukes under those circumstances. And I'd say one other thing that the peace activists are missing, the anti-war people are missing, all of the activists are missing, is that to get rid of nuclear weapons, we're also going to have to get rid of war. We can't allow war. It has to become outlawed. And in order to outlaw it, we're going to have enforcement at the international level. There's no sheriff at the global level. I worked for 20 years in the California prison system. over in Vacaville, California Medical Facility. I'm somewhat of an expert on psychopaths and sociopaths. And I can tell you that part of what we're dealing with on the international stage are certain leaders and deep state type CIA type people and Mossad people that are basically psychopaths, and they don't give a damn about Europe. They don't give a damn about the American population, and what they're for is power. And in order to stop that, we're going to have a popular movement. It's got to be nonviolent. And we're going to have to change the United Nations so it becomes a world federation.
So I'm going to put on my German hat because for half of my life I lived over there. And regarding the nuclear proliferation, which has been the topic for much of this meeting now, I just want to say that I'm really, really disappointed in the new German government, because we had an election in September, and the new government still sticks strictly to NATO agreements that the 20 or so nuclear bombs that are still in Germany, US bombs, Germany is of course not a nuclear nation, but that from NATO agreements are supposed to be carried by German tornado fighters to wherever. And this is, of course, still a threat to Russia. And I have to agree to some extent with Roger, because I think the US is not really thinking this through, because especially as a neighbor of Poland, Poland has been switched around in its borders for centuries between Prussia and Russia and so on. And I think the people, like the middle powers, they don't want that. So I can tell you for sure, the majority of Germans, the vast majority of Germans, don't want nuclear bombs, US nuclear bombs, located in Germany still. And they are up for replacement for better bombs, but still nuclear, I think next year or so. I mean, the Germans got rid of nuclear energy after Fukushima. And I have vivid memories. I grew up in the West, but I have vivid memories of all the protests against Pershing and cruise missiles, when a lot of Russian missiles were stationed in East Germany. So, so the other thing is, and here I might agree with Bowen here, Europe, the European Union at least, is on its way of becoming more of a European government, but many Europeans also don't want that, because they are afraid of losing their national power. So this is a split issue in Europe. But I have to say, unfortunately, I'm really, really skeptical that we can overcome this UN Security Council, which is, of course, a product of World War II, and that we can overcome the immense industrial military complex in all of our nations. And unfortunately, Germany is a major arms producer, and I've just read a couple of days ago, well, they had the best export year ever last year, right? So I don't know how we can disentangle the military from the whole industry and maybe from our own portfolios. Because if we look up, if we really drill down, I think a lot of people have a lot of their retirement saving or investments or whatever also invested in, the major arms producers, unfortunately. So I agree with Glenn and Roger, but I have to say the outlook for 2022 for me and for in regards to successfully banning weapons of mass destruction.
I understand that it's there's a lot of criticism, legitimate criticism of the U.S. government. But I think that we have to look at the facts in the world, and we have to note that many other governments are doing things in a similar way or much worse. You know, I'm not saying it's not valid for bad things that were done by the U.S. government, but it's not a black and white picture here. And when we speak about like a world government as an answer, my question is, if we want a world government, you know, if who guarantees that it's going to be any better? You know, I think the chances that it will be worse are much higher. With all the terrible things that we can say and all the mistakes and maybe crimes that were committed by the U.S. government, I think most of us would prefer to deal with a government like in the U.S. than like in North Korea. And these are two nuclear states, by the way. So just let's keep this in mind, please.
Thank you. Thank you again. This is most depressing afternoon. Nobody's got anything very hopeful to say. Claire Adamson.
Yeah, I have something very hopeful to say, is that Biden could have started a war in Taiwan to protect it from China, but he didn't. And Putin could have invaded Ukraine by now, but he hasn't done that. And they're all talking, which is wonderful. It's amazing. One of the biggest ways to keep from governments buying arms is solve their problems without using them. And it's, so I'm really, really happy that there is some diplomacy going on. And I'm also hoping that this new world government, it will start at the bottom with democracy, electing people that don't just answer to arms manufacturers.
I'm inclined to agree with what I heard Andre say. The government of the U.S. is not perfect, but it's one wonders about the alternatives, especially when it comes to world government. As I see it, the European Union falling apart or being under criticism for being too removed from what's happening at the local areas is, I think, one example of why there are pros and cons about centralizing power and when too far away from grassroots, so to speak. And it seems to me there's another dimension to this discussion. I don't want to in any way diminish the gravity and the urgency of dealing with nuclear weaponry, but I have my doubts that Ukraine and they, having given up their weapons, are an example that too many nations would want to follow, given the trouble that's ensued since. Finally, one question that has to be asked is, who, under what sort of governance is disarmament most likely to occur, an autocracy or a democracy? Because if we assume that it's in a democracy, there have been innumerable highly respected pundits, and the U.S. military themselves are predicting the possibility of a civil war in the U.S. So the kind of governance that has been described thus far, I think, is more in the past than what's happening in the present.
Yes, for some positives. On the good side, Trump wasn't reelected in the U.S. And on the downside, looks like he's going to run very soon. And we
say it again. On the downside, what?
Okay. The downside is that Trump may be a candidate in the next presidential. I only can say that this could be a very bad thing for global peace. That's
everyone loves to be sovereign, except we have to admit that we have to have inspections and report to other people. And allow world values to govern some of the things that are inside your country. So I think this is really a good reason to have a federal system which allows a certain amount of sovereignty, but not total barrier to the outside world.
Do you have a particular, I don't know who you're talking about. Are you talking about Canada or what, the US, or what are you referring to?
Well, some people like China don't want other people to come in and inspect their health and so on because they're sovereign, and they don't want, we don't want people coming in to Quebec and telling us what to do here. But I think it's important that we do, Quebec wants to be sovereign in quotes, but it's just a relative sovereignty.
Okay. Dolph, are you putting your hand up, or are you just, no, Dolph?
I'm just changing position. I wasn't prepared to speak on this subject.
Okay.
It's a little beyond my realm.
Yeah, well, you're the tree man. I mean, if somebody wanted to change the subject, I wouldn't stop you a bit. Today, we're going around and around in circles. I think we're just, I don't know. I don't think we're making any progress this afternoon. Maybe you want to tell us about a tree or two.
I can add something. Just, it's Ronnie.
Okay.
Well, I mean, the government of Chile was just elected, and we have a good example of what gives us hope, something to give us hope. That's a big win.
Sorry, but I'm not celebrating because I know nothing about it. Tell us what happened in Chile. I don't even know.
Well, they had a very, very, apparently it was the most, how would I say, controversial or anyway, election ever between a dictator type of man who would be following in Pinochet's footsteps and the progressive side won. And it was an amazing election. Apparently they were neck to neck. So that bodes well. And I think we haven't mentioned young people being more concerned. How many millions of young people will be ready to vote in the next, few years? And
not any of them here, though. Damn it, Alexi looks like the youngest face in this bunch, and I bet you're not in your 20s, are you?
I'm in my 30s.
Okay.
The second 20s, they say.
I don't think there's anybody under 40 here. Is there?
Oh my God, Ann Pohl is here. Hi, Ann. Anyway, I think it's hopeful.
Okay.
I mean, you know how they say you can be optimist or pessimist. You might as well be optimist, because being a pessimist doesn't get you anywhere.
Well, I don't care if we want to have a real fight, but I don't think we're fighting. Everybody's just sort of nya today. And that's sort of,
I don't see it that way.
No, all right. Ann Pohl, what's on your mind? Ann?
Yeah, here I am. Hello, everybody. You don't know me, but most of you don't know me. It's nice to meet you. I've been involved in a lot of stuff over the years. But can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're doing
okay,
great.
good.
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. But I just wanted to bring in a related but very different topic. And that's that you may or may not know that the government of Canada is finally developing a nuclear waste management policy. And that, of course, is directly related to nuclear weapons, in that some kinds of nuclear waste are easily converted into the material that you need for nuclear weapons. So I thought some of you might be interested to know that that draft policy, the policy process has been going on. Well, I think, Meta, I saw you in some of the sessions.
Yeah, but I don't know where it stands now. So you're going to have to tell us all.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you all. I'm about to do that. I'm about to do that. So I've been tracking it. I'm with the Council of Canadians, and I've been tracking it on behalf of first myself, then our chapter, And now the national organization is involved. And where it stands at the moment is that we expect the draft policy to drop anytime after New Year's, and that there will be a consultation process. It would be really good to have as many people as possible informed, and ready to respond to it when it drops, because we'll probably have, a few weeks or something like that. So where the Council of Canadians comes into this is that we had to have, we went through quite an internal discussion. It's not an issue that the council has normally been really involved in, but it is an issue where all the things that we are concerned about, like democracy, water protection, climate, all the issues that corporatization, all the issues that we're really concerned about, they all come together in the issue of nuclear waste management. The board finally.
Yeah, in terms of what they are actually proposing as excuse me, what I'm doing is I'm trying to fix a broken chain. And it's not very polite of me to try to chair a meeting while fixing a broken chain, but that's why I'm not paying attention to you guys as much as I should. Anyway, what I'm saying, Anne, is there's so much debate that has gone on about Canada's waste management of nuclear weapons or fissile material, that if you say that they've come to some sort of decision, what is it they've decided? And do you like what they have come up with? Because, I think it's...
Meta, I didn't say that they decided.
Oh.
What I said was that we expect their draft policy to drop sometime, to be released sometime after the new year. We don't know what's going to be in that policy.
So you really don't have a clue, or your guess, it'd be nice to guess what you think they're going to do.
Well, I don't know. I don't feel like I'm in the business of guessing it.
Okay.
They certainly got a lot more response from grassroots and community organizations and Indigenous people, and the whole gamut of people who are very concerned about this waste issue. And all the ramifications of it, including potential waste from the SMRs and that kind of thing, which could produce weapons. So they certainly got a lot more of that than they had in mind. They had in mind strictly a pro forma process, and they were basically forced by the rest of us to open that process up into something that was a little bit more meaningful. And now we're waiting to see what they're going to come up with. Maybe they're going to go back to plan A and come up with a pro forma version, but they're not going to get away with it without a lot of talk. And that's where the council comes in, is that even though it's something that we haven't been doing in the past, we're actually we've prepared a backgrounder document to help people get ready for this when it drops. So it has a lot of answers to a lot of questions from our point of view about the waste issue, including the proliferation issue. And then Nuclear Waste Watch, who are our leads in the NGO community on this, they're doing a webinar on the 12th of January to help people, what they call it, review and restart, assuming that the policy is coming down any minute.
Okay, the problem, Anne, is that I don't see any possible common ground. You either bury the stuff or you don't bury it. What else are you going to do? You're going to shoot it off into space? No. You're either going to bury it or you're not going to bury it. And there's no way of doing half burying it. You can't, there's no consensus possible, no compromise possible. You either go one way or the other, as far as I can tell. Now, which way do you want to go? Because frankly, I'm not sure which way I would want to go.
Okay, well, my conclusion after looking into this for 2 years now and having been the primary author of the 12-page backgrounder document that the council has produced, is that we actually have to half bury it, in the sense that the really bad stuff needs to go in the ground, but it also needs to go in the ground with a plan for continuing monitoring for what's called rolling stewardship. That's what they call it. And that's really the only way to deal with the really bad stuff. The rest of the stuff, possibly you could come up with some way of creating some kind of dump site, the low or medium. It's still going to need monitoring, but it won't need as intense monitoring. One of the problems with the waste is that when you put a couple different kinds together, they can produce new babies that are even worse than what's in there, all on their own. And then another problem with the waste is that as
new babies, hold on. Like new types of radiation, because tell me what
new types of waste. Yeah, they can generate it. Well, when the heat of sitting next to each other, they can basically generate it. Yeah. I mean, it's all in this document. I could put a link to the document up there in case anybody's interested.
Put it on the website. Don't put it in the link. Put it in the way. You guys keep putting things on the chat, and that's not a good solution. You put it someplace where we'll keep it on the website. So
well,
you
have
just this section on
you move it from the. I don't know how to put stuff on your website.
Okay.
I can put it in the chat, and somebody can copy it.
Everybody should learn then. What you do is you go to our website, which is tosavetheworld.ca. Okay. And if you scroll right on the front page, there's instructions about how to find how to navigate around that website. So just follow the instructions. But I'll tell you this much. We have 6 global threats. They're war and weapons, mostly nuclear, especially nuclear, global warming, famine, pandemics, radioactive risks, and cyber risks. In addition to those, we have 3 policy sectors. If you're just going to be talking about global policies or national policies, they are economics, governance, and civil society. And if you want to talk about issues of human rights, you put that under governance. That's why I told people a while ago to post a document. Pierre's going to put this. Actually, it's David Miller's document. Going to put it in the comments column of the section on governance. But now you want to go to we have 6 global threats, one of which is radioactive risks. And that's exactly where you're putting the information about radiation exposure.
I had a question for Ann Cole around the rolling stewardship, but are you referring to newly produced radioactive waste or radioactive waste that has been produced already?
Well, Canada has not had a waste management policy since it started doing nuclear development in the 40s, the 30s, actually. So there's a lot of waste around. And then with the SMRs that they're talking about, there will be more waste if they get away with starting them up. So take your pick. But the really dangerous stuff that they're planning to put into what they call the deep geological repositories, way down underground, those are the ones that absolutely require a strategy for ongoing monitoring with rolling stewardship, because they can heat up on its own.
Chile had been the oldest, longest running democracy in South America until Nixon, Kissinger, and Chile's military and business overthrew it in 1973 and installed Pinochet, who was the brutal dictator for 17 years. And then they came back to a democracy again after that. And now they have a young progressive who defeated a Pinochet supporter. So you can see the link in the blog. It actually appeared twice.
To the question about a deep geological repository, so that's a permanent nuclear waste site. And I think it's unfortunate that Canada hasn't had a real policy about nuclear waste up to this point. And I think Canada is in a very fortunate position because Canada is the second largest country in the world and has lots of sites. assume that could be used in some way or another. But for many, many nations that have nuclear power, like for instance Germany, this is a very difficult and very controversial issue. Germany used to export nuclear waste. Now, for some decades, they haven't done that. But the fight about a deep geological repository, so where the really bad stuff can stay for hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years, has been going on since the 70s. And there have been many protests and things like that. But I think there might be a technological solution, but what I am, as somebody who has worked in translation, what I am really worried about is actually how to transmit all this knowledge. I mean, we cannot even, most of us cannot even properly read medieval English, yes, or symbols change. And let's say there were natural disasters or whatever, and people find in the future, like this revolving stewardship, I assume I think it assumes that peace, there's no major disruptions. But I think we cannot assume that there are no major disruptions. And let's say 200 years from now or 500 years from now, somebody digs up a canister, dented canister, and cannot decipher what's on it or the symbols, and tries to open it by whatever machinery or a robot or whatever. So I think this transmission of knowledge about the dangers is really fraught with its own dangers. Because if you think how quickly we change media of where we store knowledge, we don't use record players or tapes anymore. Most people don't do CDs anymore. You don't have, most people don't even have a turntable or whatever. So I'm not sure that this knowledge can be also transferred adequately over generations and generations and generations.
I'd like to first of all give an update about what is happening with regard to trauma and with regard to this place and all the rest of it. First of all, it seems to me, and by the way, people like Adam Curl and John Burton and Vomik Volkan have been saying this since the 50s, but trauma is an extremely important cause of war, and it's being completely ignored. Or completely, but very much so. And what is happening in terms of us is that we're continually getting requests for work on trauma, because trauma is transmitted to future generations. It creates frustration, it creates violence. And if it's not dealt with, and this is the case almost all over the world, we are inviting war, and that is happening. Bosnia, which is close to us, is a case in point. There is now danger, I won't go into it too heavily, but that war might even break out sometime later in the new year.
Between whom? Between who and whom?
Between all the three various groups, between
all three of the same groups as always?
As always. The Bosnian Serbs are withdrawing from or want to have their own army. Milorad Dodik, who's the head of what's called the Serbian Republic, the Republika Srpska, is talking about their own army. The Croats aren't terribly happy. The Serbs also, and the Bosniaks, of course, are at the end of this. So it's not a very good situation now. Also, in terms of the migrant situation, Croatia has been brought before various tribunals, Council of Europe, et cetera, because of the pushbacks, and it's extremely violent pretty much all over the region. There are epidemics of things like tuberculosis, which are not being reported upon in places like Greece. Yeah, what can I say? By the way, I put a slightly facetious end-of-year report or end-of-year comment on my Facebook page. People want to have a look. We're getting requests now from places like South Sudan. We're doing a lot of work with Nigeria. There have been several reports on the Uyghurs this week, the last 2 weeks, and we're working with a group of them. Where there are many genocides. My point is there are quite a number of genocides occurring all over the world, and nobody really is doing it.
Actually, I didn't introduce you properly by saying that you're doing psychotherapy with trauma victims of war.
Right.
We should explain that to people who don't know it.
Yeah, I'll put our website on the chat. It's not completely up to date, but
The chat doesn't show. You need to put things in the website.
Okay,
The chat, people won't see the chat. So
okay, I
only
will
the
do.
people who are on this talk show can see the chat.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
Will do.
Thank you. And anything further on that? I didn't mean to interrupt you because you're
No, there is an enormous amount of torture and abuse, particularly of children. And there is also an epidemic of suicide right now, particularly among young people. And this is present all over the world. This needs to be done. There needs to be a great deal of work on this. Anybody who's interested, please do contact us.
Thank you so much, Charles, and bless you for doing the kind of work you're doing. It takes a certain kind of hardiness of character, I think, to do what you're doing.
Well, I've been doing it since 1988, and our organization has existed now for 26 and a half years. We've been down here. So
certainly a need for it, and bless you for doing it. Thank you. All right, onward. Rose Dyson.
Okay, I have a question to pose to Anne, who told us that there's a new nuclear waste management policy in Canada. I'm just wondering, Anne, I assume you know the details of this policy that's been adopted or emerged. Is it how is the government reconciling the decision to carry on with the small nuclear reactors and how and the waste that's likely to emerge from the use of them all over the place, to their proliferation, or is there some new invention to deal with the waste that I don't know about?
No, there is no new invention to deal with the waste. There has been no comment on the need to reconcile the waste that might be generated. The problem with the small modular nuclear reactors, there are many problems with them, and they're dealt with in the document that I just put in the link to in the chat, and I've also just put the link to on the website. One of the problems is that they're not really small. Another problem is that they don't actually exist. There are multiple numbers of, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 or something, different designs that are floating around. There are 3 or 4 that have kind of risen more to the surface as being potential, but none of them have actually been built and function. Each produces a different kind of waste. And some of them are designed to use recycled waste when you produce the recycled waste from the old system, the CANDU reactors, and put it into put the piece of it, the very small portion of it, recycle the very small portion out and put it into the small modular nuclear reactors, you're then left with a chunk of which a big piece is very, very, very like, less than a first cousin away, maybe a sibling away from the stuff that you need to build a nuclear bomb. And not only that, but what you get out of it is that particular substance, which is like, as I said, a sibling away from what you need to build a nuclear bomb. It's in an inert state, so it's very easy to move it around because it isn't activated. It won't necessarily show up on the kinds of things that are used as scans, say at the border, to see what somebody, because it hasn't been activated yet. So that's extremely problematic. And there are a number of people working in New Brunswick where that particular type of reactor is the one that's being most promoted to mobilize against it, and they could certainly use the support and all the stuff.
And does that reactor exist? Do any of
none of them exist? None of those small.
Yeah,
but they're all going to exist unless we stop them from existing.
Yeah, and
so that's why the fight to get a decent, the fight to get the very best possible nuclear waste management policy is a fight as well to stop the SMRs.
Yes,
because
and
it will be impossible. It will be impossible to manage the waste that comes from them. The policy can't even be geared to that.
Agreed, Anne. We started our meeting.
Hold on.
We started our meeting with differences between Quebec and Canada. We are blessed in Quebec with two organisms. One is TCNR by Gordon Edwards, who gives us right information. The other one is BAP, Bureau d'Audience Publique en Environnement, who prevent the government from exploring uranium in Quebec. And this is very progressive because it's very democratic if the government listens, of course, to the Bureau. But so I wanted to.
That's good. That's excellent. I've learned a lot of what I've learned from Gordon.
Yeah, I just want to add, though, that Canada's policy on meeting the Paris targets, net zero, the Climate Accountability Act, and how we're going to transition to clean energy does include adopting small nuclear reactors. Now, I'm certainly a part of the groups like Just Earth and within CANRAC generally that oppose this aspect of trying to meet our goals for clean energy, but it does seem to be a serious contradiction in terms of this new policy on waste management and still proceeding to build these nuclear, small nuclear reactors to meet the challenges of climate change.
Yeah, the small nuclear reactors they're not going to compete economically. They're going to take too long to get into the lineup to help with the urgent need for transition. They're going to be too expensive compared to renewables by the time they actually get in there. And we don't need them. What we have to face this, according to pretty much all the experts that I've been listening to that hang around with people like Gordon, and probably Gordon has said this too, I can't remember. That's with the group that the last speaker was talking about in Quebec, Gordon Edwards, is we need to keep the can-dos that are already on stream functioning properly for as long as we possibly can during the transition period. That's what we need to do, but we don't need to build any more nuclear in order to meet the climate goals.
I certainly agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, good.
I wanted to respond or build on what Charles Tabor said, that trauma is a basic factor in our situation, that we've been in a war system, and system change is really the language I have not heard sufficiently, that we've been in a war system and it has injured people. And under the injury, people go to a defensiveness, to a psychopathology. And somehow we need to see system change and a turn of heart, of compassion to all the suffering that has gone on, that transcends all the borders that we have. It looks to a new system of governance. I mentioned in a previous talk the governance model based on living systems rather than a governmental structure that is fixed. And I think that is very important, that we need to see that there is a need globally to touch people's heart, that everything is in a system toward either confrontation and destruction, and the climate situation exacerbates that, highlights it, that people know at all levels this arrangement is not working, and that perhaps seeds the capacity to transcend our differences, that we are in a moral struggle across the world of affinity among humanity against those forces and remnants of the injury that everyone has suffered from the war system. We have to end this, see this war system as the enemy of all, and a transformation to a system of caring and sharing and helping and healing has to be part of our vocabulary in whatever we are doing. As the United Nations said in resolution 5225, before this millennium began, that unless we see the creation of a culture of peace and nonviolence as our common mission in whatever we are doing, whatever we are saying, humanity is doomed to extinction. And that is what we are working at, seeing now. And the climate calamities that is affecting everywhere, perhaps is a stimulus to help people see we must have a sense of coming together, and we, such as are here, need to reinforce the language of transcending the differences, the turning of heart, the recognition of common humanity, that the caring of sharing and life and love in the family is more the model than the domination, command, impunity, and control systems of the governments.
You're speaking for all of us, because I think every single person here is here because we have something that we care deeply about, and we all share exactly the same values that you do. Charles, do you have one final word that you want to say?
The two most important qualities that we can have are, number one, compassion for one another and empathy with one another. And the other point is that we need to listen to one another.
All right, thank you, folks. I see Alexi's put up a heart. Thank you. Heart to you too, Alexi. We all heart to everybody.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a
We'll
lot.
see each other in the new year. Bless you, dears, dear sweet friends. Bye-bye.
Another new year.
Goodbye. Happy New Year. This is the 390th talk show that we've done. This happens to be a global town hall, but we do make a show at least 3 days a week to discuss serious global issues. So I hope you'll go look at the website, to savetheworld.ca, because we do have conversations going there all the time about 6 global issues and the reforms that are possible in governance, economics, and civil society. To find a particular talk show that you're wanting to see, enter its title or the episode number in the search bar, or the name of one of the guest speakers. And then after you've watched or listened, scroll down and share your thoughts about the show with the other viewers. And you can also talk about any other topics that you want to discuss on the various public comments columns of the talk show. This website is meant for dialogue, so please do join in. Bye.